Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, we have another session on governance and risk by Mr. Gennaro Scalo, Go-to-Market Director at Archer Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Mr. Gennaro has a career that spans the broader areas of governance, risk, and compliance, and information security, and he has helped organizations build integrated functions to address the many challenges associated with risk, including risk management and regulatory compliance. Please join me to welcome him on stage.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Thank you, and thank you to the National Cybersecurity Center for giving me the opportunity to address this distinguished set of individuals. As I look at my slides, I can see here that the font has been messed up on them. So that'll really flow into my talk track, which is really focused around introducing the ideas of agility, resiliency, and foresight into a conversation about risk management. And as we talk through and look at the current state of cybersecurity, it is events like this where we see the private sector, the public sector, the academic sector, and international partners coming together to discuss cybersecurity that really lead to this brighter future that technology can bring us to, a future that's very much focused on innovation and digitization. But without these concepts of agility, resiliency, and foresight in cyber risk management, it becomes very difficult to achieve the missions and the objectives that government organizations and private organizations are looking to achieve. And what I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about is how all of this is really converging into an integrated approach to risk management. And again, I apologize for the slides not really showing the proper language. I think we had a new font from our marketing team, and clearly it's not a font that is installed on most computers. So rather than use the slides, I'll just talk a bit and click through where I think there's some images that are going to come up. If you stop and think about the history of Jordan, for thousands or more years, it's been thriving, adapting, innovating, and that's really what needs to happen in the risk management space. This idea of agility becomes paramount to surviving in the modern day. When you think about adversaries planning attacks and plotting threats against everyone, that ability to quickly respond to those things and have this notion of being very agile in those response becomes very compelling. You think about the news over the last year in Jordan. I was reading an article that said there were almost 1,000 cyber attacks that were declared and looked at a national level. When you have those types of attack surface, it's really important that you're able to agilely respond to those. And when you think about the ways that we respond to those, one of the ways that we respond to them is relying on more and more third parties. Third parties have become a pivotal part of most organizations and most countries' operations, but those third parties themselves also bring with them new risks and challenges. So if we think about how we look at agility and then what happens in the face of resiliency, resiliency is also something that is well known to the nation of Jordan. It has been a place that has been stable and been able to drive that resiliency in what is sometimes, not a most stable world platform. And that resiliency is really also important when you start to look at things like the amount of cyber attacks that we're seeing or the amount of third parties that we're relying on. And we see more and more risk surface, more and more attack surface. And it is important and imperative to be resilient in the face of those things. And the last area that we're going to discuss on is really around foresight. The need to anticipate what is happening and respond to it before it does in fact happening. And one of the things that is really pleasing about what's happening here in the country is the National Cybersecurity Framework that they're looking at. This adoption of quantified risk. Being able to take risk and quantify it provides the ability to have a strategic forward-looking view of risk. Not just a backward-looking view. Most risk is assessed looking backwards in a periodic qualitative way. We think about what's happened over the past X amount of time. We assess how likely that is to happen again in the future, and then we rate our risk and score our risk. That is no longer enough. We now need to be able to look at risks, look at what's happening in the past, but also look forward to the future and use quantitative approach and predictive analytics to figure out exactly what is going to happen in a future risk state. And when we take all of this and we start to put it together, we get this notion of agility, resiliency, and forward thinking. And this is what's really required from an integrated risk management standpoint. Risk is changing. It used to be that risk was looked at in very much of a silo. What is the impact of this particular area of the business? Now organizations and government agencies are starting to look at risk across a broader spectrum, trying to understand what the financial, strategic, and societal impacts of those risks are. If we do this, what will happen? And maybe more importantly, if we don't do this, what might happen and what opportunity are we going to miss? And all of those things really become important when we start to look at this idea of integrated risk across a variety of different domains. And I think when you think about risk, it exists in many different areas. It can exist from a regulatory perspective. What are the regulatory and legislative requirements that we're having to act upon? It can exist in a cyber perspective. What threats and adversaries are we facing in the cyber world that we need to respond to? It also exists internally from an audit department perspective. How are we proactively assessing our internal rules and regulations, our external requirements, and ensuring that we're doing all the things that we need to do? It also exists at an operational and enterprise level, ensuring that all risks that are operationally disruptive can be managed proactively and effectively. It exists from a third-party perspective. Are the third parties that we're relying on that are critical to our business, have they been identified, have they been assessed, and do we understand what impact the absence of that third party or disruption of that third party might cause to us? And what that starts to lead to is this idea of integrated risk management, where more and more organizations are requiring more things from their risk teams, requiring them not just to look at risk in an individual fashion, but to broadly look across the organization, identify what areas of risk exist across the different areas of the business, and then engaging business stakeholders across varying degrees of the business to be able to determine what impact that might have on different functions, different opportunities, and different engagements. And the last thing that it's doing is it's demanding these insights. It's not enough for risk management to just continue looking backwards, but how do we look forwards? How do we determine what is going to happen? How do we look around the corner before we get to that corner? How do we use predictive, real-time, quantifiable metrics to make those decisions? And we start to look at this as an example through the lens of third party. We'll use an example. In previous worlds, third party would have been very much managed by a centralized third party governance team. There'd be a team of individuals that would be asked to go out and assess what impact a third party provider had on a mission objective or on an organizational goal. That would be something that was done very much ad hoc, independently, without the thought of the business. We would then have a procurement system that would identify all of those vendors and put them in place. We'd have a business team that would rely upon those vendors, and then we would kind of leave it at that. Nowadays, we're very much living in an integrated world where the third-party supply systems should integrate directly in with the third-party risk systems to proactively notify the third-party team that a new vendor is coming on board. And this is what we know about that vendor from public information. And based upon that, can we do a real-time assessment of that vendor? And can we bring in the business stakeholders and make sure that they're giving us information on what that third-party provider is going to provide as a service and how critical it is to our business? And then can we take all that information from the different areas of business and the different stakeholders and start to learn and predict and provide insights on that third party's performance and the impact that it may have on our overall business? And kind of in closing, to keep us in the timer on my time screen here, what that starts to mean is that risk management is changing. The way that risk is managed across an organization is changing. Very similar to the way that we would have seen finance or human capital managed in the previous worlds, there would have been a variety of different systems managing your financial team, your accounts receivable, your accounts payable, your expense management system, your procurement system. All of these would have been siloed systems. And as finance started to transform, the need for an enterprise resource planning tool emerged. All these individual areas of finance fell underneath one single platform. Very much the same with human capital. There used to be a system for managing time off, a system for managing payroll, a system for managing your background checks. All of those have developed into this idea of a human resource system that is used for all human capital planning across an organization. And risk is very much undergoing that same evolution right now. No longer is there the need to have a system to manage cyber risk and third-party risk and business resiliency and audit and regulatory risk. There's a need to have all of these integrated into a single system that will allow an end-to-end visibility for risk management. And that is what the Archer system is and provides. We provide a single integrated risk management platform built from the ground up to manage many areas of risk across all of those domains. With that, I will leave you with the notion of leveraging agility, resiliency, and foresight to manage risk effectively requires that single integrated platform. And hopefully, at least if nothing else, you've enjoyed my agility and resiliency in the face of having slides that weren't working. I wish I had the foresight to check that font beforehand, because then I would have come full circle and maybe had slightly better slides to support my conversation. But I thank you all, and I hope you have an enjoyable rest of the day.